This next proof, you might notice a couple things. One, we have more diagrams than we have before. And two, our final step isn't just to say that two triangles are congruent, but that does happen to be something we'll say along the way. So let's approach this and see what happens. Why there's this need for a fifth step here. And so, looking at our given information, it's good to see that we are simply told that two things are congruent. And so in this case, we see that angle A is congruent to angle C. And this is a time that we can just say given because in our given information, we were told that two things were congruent. And so we're going to mark it here. And we're also going to mark it in this fourth diagram like we have been in previous flow proofs, because we're going to use this information to show that the two triangles are congruent to each other. So we used our first piece of given information. Now our second piece of given information is talking about parallel lines again. And so let's look at our parallel lines. They are BC and AD. So if we mark those as congruent or as parallel, remember when we see parallel lines, we are going to look for alternate interior angles that are congruent. And there are two pairs of alternate interior angles you could talk about. This angle above the transversal here at B and the angle below the transversal at D, or vice versa. But only one set of those is created by the parallel lines. So we don't want to talk about this angle here because this angle was not created by either of the parallel lines. We want to talk about this angle above the transversal because we can see one of the sides is the top parallel line. And we also want to use this angle because we see one of its sides is that bottom parallel line. And so this is a case of alternate interior angles created by parallel lines. And that way we know they are congruent to each other. So we'll mark it here as well. And that's that reason that says if two lines parallel, a little more lengthy here. Then alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay. And so we just need one last pair of information. It has to be a segment because we already have two pairs of angles marked. So we're either going to use angle, angle, side or angle, side, angle. And it has to be a guaranteed piece of information. And so if you recall, a guarantee that we always have is that if two triangles share a side, remember that side is going to be the same size for each triangle. It's the same length for the bottom triangle as it is for the top triangle. And so we can mark it here as well. And that is our reflexive property, which you can abbreviate property as just prop if you choose. Okay, and once we've marked that, we see we have three pieces of information shown, and that's enough to know that these two triangles are congruent. So when you do this, look carefully at what it is that you've marked, and sometimes it helps to just look at one triangle at a time. So maybe you just look at the bottom triangle here, and you'll see that you have an angle, another angle, and the side not connecting those two angles, which is the theorem angle, angle, side. So we see angle, angle, side is in play, and that means we should be able to say that these two triangles are congruent. And so maybe you call one of these triangles ABD. Now that we've chosen that, the other order also matters. And in this case, that would have to be triangle CDB. Check that out. You should see that. The bottom triangle is listed here. The top triangle is listed here. Now, we did that because, if you recall, when you know that two triangles are congruent, not only are these three pieces of information congruent, but the other three are as well. The other two pairs of sides are congruent, and the last pair of angles have to be congruent, which is all that this last statement is asking us. It's asking us, why do we know that segment AB is congruent to segment CD? We know that because we've already shown the triangles are congruent to each other. And if you look in your congruent statement, AB is listed first here, CD is listed first here, meaning that those two segments have to be congruent, just like we're saying at the end. So because we know we have congruent triangles, we know that all pairs of segments are congruent to each other. We have a reason for that, and we could write out a very lengthy reason, but we are just going to simply put the 5 letters CPCTC, which stand for the words corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And that's all you have to put. But if you want to make a note for later, what these 5 letters really mean are, if you know 2 triangles are congruent, then you're supposed to know that all pairs of sides and angles are congruent. So you don't have to write all this out, but it is good to know what it means when we write the 5 letters CPCTC. And so it's just like proving triangles are congruent. We just take it one step further, showing we know what it means for triangles to be congruent. It would mean that other segments and other angles that we haven't talked about yet are also congruent.